RealAg Live.
Hey, Kara Oosterhuis here with RealAgriculture.com. It is Friday. We made it through yet another week. I always say, and you guys are so tired of me saying it, I'm sure, but I just don't know where the time goes. How are we at April 9th already? How are we starting to think about getting drills in the ground if you're not already in the ground? It is, it's crazy. And it seems like from here on out, suddenly it becomes Christmas. So let's join the ride together. Anyways, for today's live here, I have here with me Debra Hauer with the Canadian Agricultural Human Resource Council. How is it going today?
It's going really well. It's very, very warm in Ottawa, like summertime here.
I heard that. That's awesome. It's got to be nice to start to see the flowers come out of the ground, those perennials, and get things rolling.
Mm-hmm.
So we're here today to talk about some of the impacts COVID-19 has had on the agricultural sector, especially when it comes to labor shortages. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Certainly. We did some research over the winter time with agricultural producers and released a report this past week about the effects of COVID-19 on the agriculture workforce. So what we found was that agriculture outperformed the Canadian economy in 2020. So altogether across Canada, GDP was down about 5%. However, in agriculture, GDP increased by 7%. So our production in the industry leapt ahead. However, that increase in production masked labor shortages, ongoing labor shortages, and also those specific to COVID-19. So we found that the COVID-19 cost the agriculture industry, and that's production agriculture on farm only, $2.9 billion or 4.2% of sales. This was the effects were uneven across agriculture. So some parts of agriculture had very little in the way of effects, and some were very, very strongly affected.
Okay, so elaborate on that. What parts of the industry were more affected than others?
We found that horticulture of all types were very much affected. Mainly because they rely on labor to the largest extent of other sectors. So, for example, grain and oilseed sector are very highly mechanized. If you are missing a body on your farm, you have a high effect. There's a big effect on that farm. However, across the industry, there was less of an effect. In horticulture, they rely on a lot of people, and that was the big one on the crop side. On the animal side, beekeepers told us that they were also in dire straits. They also rely a lot on temporary foreign workers and had difficulties bringing temporary foreign workers in, and also the poultry and egg sector.
Now, I know there's also some stats out there of Canadians and there just seemed to be a lack of Canadians applying for these jobs too. Do you want to elaborate on what you guys found there?
Absolutely. So of the employers that said that they had labor shortages, they told us that they had experienced fewer Canadian applicants than they normally get. So generally, they tell us that there are few Canadian applications. In previous research, we've had 1 in 3 farmers who have an empty position find that they receive 0 Canadians applying for those jobs. And in 2020, it was worse.
Wow. So what sorts of things are we doing to, is there anything we can be doing to kind of attract more Canadians to these jobs?
It makes me think of the commercials where there's a big red button that's called the easy button, and you just press it and poof, your problems are gone. There is no easy button for labor issues in agriculture. There are a variety of issues that are leading to the workforce challenges in agriculture, and there, I think, would be needed a variety of different solutions. So one is to be looking at how to get more people into the industry. And traditionally, if you needed somebody to work on your farm, you would go to other people in your community and you say, hey, I have a job open, and there might be the neighbor's kid down the road, or there might be somebody who's retired that could help out seasonally. Those people in your community are fewer and farther between. So that's one aspect. So it's important for people to be thinking of outside the box or outside the agriculture tent as to who else might be able to come and work on the farm. Perhaps people from other sectors, people who are not from your community, and to be being looking outside the box a little bit about bringing people in.
And how do you think messaging to attract workers has changed? Because I mean, if we would have had this conversation on April 9th last year,
Mhm.
COVID was obviously there. It'd been determined a
Mhm.
global pandemic, but we all had no idea. Like we didn't, now we're over a year in, and we still, I mean, there's vaccines, but we're not really sure of when. There's still a lot of
Mhm.
uncertainty. How has messaging changed going forward?
Well, I believe that farmers are saying that they provide a safe workplace, that there has been a lot of effort in reconfiguring workplaces to ensure that people are safe in a variety of ways. Farmers are also flexible in. I think we have all become flexible, to be honest, in the past 12 months, where if suddenly somebody needs to stay home to look after childcare, or to be able to self-isolate because somebody is a close contact has become ill, people are starting to roll with the punches a little bit more. So there's a little bit more flexibility that way. I also think that there are jobs that are year-round jobs in agriculture, that there are businesses that offer full-time employment and also with benefits. And there's some aspects of the Canadian economy that have been hit really, really hard, and people are looking at very few hours. They're very looking to find something that's stable. And I think there's an opportunity for a lot of farmers to be able to say, hey, we have a job that is year round, or if it's seasonal, it's almost year round, and we pay well, probably more than people anticipate, and also that there are benefits involved. And there's an aspect to telling your story that way.
So, as a Canadian Agricultural Human Resources Center, like what are you guys doing anything specific to kind of attract workers as well?
We're working with our partners in that regard. What we spend a lot of time doing is providing resources and webinars and training programs to farmers about how to be better employers. And that includes speaking to farmers about how to recruit workers, and also, once you have them, how to keep them, to retain them, treat them like gold, because they're hard to find. It's hard to find a new one. That also involves how to recruit people who have the right uh, aptitude and attitude, because there are things that can be trained. So how to train your employees so that you end up with somebody who starts off at maybe not at 100%, that can be trained into that role. And that then, so we're spending a lot of time working with our partners in that regard.
And with the study you guys did, was there any certain, like, did you look at certain ages or anything as well that you guys are like, that there's big gaps? It seems like there's maybe only the older generation applying or the younger generation, or were ages not really looked at?
We didn't look at ages. The demographic issue, though, is what's driving our labor shortages. That's why we're having more and more labor shortages, because people are retiring. All of us are getting a little bit older every year, and so that is what's driving things. So it's the young people who are not thinking about agriculture. So we're hoping to start some research about perceptions of agriculture, and why is it that people are not thinking about agriculture as a career, because those of us who are in it know that there are opportunities, that there are jobs, and the people who aren't in it are not all that aware. So we would like to start talking about uh, the messaging that could be done in order to encourage people. And it's not only on employers. I should mention that there's a role to play for communities, towns, economic development corporations, these groups who could then also be encouraging people to come live in their communities, because it's not only one person that you're trying to attract. You're trying to attract that person, the spouse, and the kids. So people need to be able to imagine, what will their spouse do when they're in the community? Is there housing? Where will the kids go to school? So it's important to be thinking about a work-life situation together. And that's, in my mind, not only on the employer. That's a larger community could be involved in encouraging more people to move to rural areas.
Now, do you think there's a government role as well if you're looking at things like attracting people to rural communities? You know, we need things like rural connectivity, things like that. Is there a role for government here too?
Um, there would be a role for government, but I will leave that to our partners to advocate for those aspects. Our organization is a research organization, and so we do the research, provide the research, and then our partners pick it up and choose to do advocacy in the way that they do.
Absolutely. So Lara has a question here. She says, was meat processing a part of the study? It's a sector that seems to have non-COVID related labor issues sometimes. And that's, yeah, so any thoughts on that?
The meat processing was not a part of the study. So our study, when we talked about $2.9 billion, was production agriculture only. However, we do recognize that there have, on an ongoing basis, have had that food processing has had severe workforce issues before COVID and continue to have issues after COVID. And certainly what's been happening in the food processing industry affects farmers. So there's been a lot of concern that way. We did some research on behalf of the Canadian Meat Council 2-3 years ago that indicated that the job vacancy rate at that time with meat processing was around 9.5%. So they had 9.5%, 9 or 10 workstations out of 100 were empty at that time.
So we're looking like you had mentioned earlier on the broadcast that agriculture, we kind of boast ourselves in providing a safe work environment. Do you want to elaborate on kind of what your research maybe has found from, you know, across the board, providing a safe work environment kind of could mean different things?
It could mean different things. So the people who are involved in horticulture production spoke about providing PPE, spoke about installing plexiglass barriers, say, for example, on planting platforms or harvesting platforms, that sort of thing. They very much appreciated government support in providing funds in order to allow for that to happen. Also for housing for temporary foreign workers as well too. So there was some support for isolation for the initial 14 days, as well as reconfiguring housing to allow for more isolation too. Does that answer your question? I'm kind of heading off on a topic there.
Yeah, no, that absolutely does.
Yeah. Our farmers indicated, who responded to the survey, indicated on average that their costs increased by 12% in order to provide those sorts of safety and isolation pieces as well too. So those aspects were not without cost, but were absolutely necessary in the past year. I should
So
mention
what
also.
no,
No,
you
go
go ahead.
ahead. I was
No,
going to
that's
say
great.
that we asked farmers what their concerns were in the upcoming year, what they were most concerned about. So what they said was employing temporary foreign workers, having foreign workers come to Canada. So I know that both employer groups and also governments have been working hard to ensure that that happens. Also finding and retaining Canadian workers, and then also understanding COVID-19 protocol support and access to PPE. So those pieces are what is most concerning farmers as we're starting into the new growing season.
Totally. And when you're looking at some of these losses that farmers unfortunately faced, was there any surprises when you kind of looked at what these losses were, where they came from?
Well, I was surprised about poultry and egg as being being a sector that had losses. Now, certainly the supply managed industries were able to pivot really quickly and adjust their production based on the wonkiness of the supply chain early on in the pandemic. So I was surprised to, that was a surprise for me. Horticulture didn't surprise me because we know that they require large numbers of people in order to plant and harvest their crops. And also with beekeepers, that wasn't a surprise.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought here. So when you're looking at what a loss is, or when you're looking at not a loss, but when you don't have enough employees or you don't have enough people to support each agricultural business, where do you draw the line? At what point do you guys actually decide, okay, we're at a real shortage here? Is there a percentage you look at, or how do you look at that from a research standpoint?
So from a research standpoint, when we have a survey, we ask people if they had vacant positions for which they were not able to find bodies. And then we ask people how many of those might be, and we slice them up according to whether or not they were beef producers, grain and oilseed producers, and so on. Then we ask people in another part of the survey what their revenues were and whether or not they had labor shortages, what those effects might be. And it wasn't just lost sales, but it could be extreme stress, it could be delayed expansion plans, and so on. For those people who said lost sales, we asked if it was 5%, 10%, 15%. And if they said 15% and they had revenues of $2 million, we do a calculation and say, okay, there was a loss of 15% on the revenue of $2 million. If it was a beef producer, we look at all the beef producers in the country and say, well, if that was representative, then this we can generalize across the country, and then that's $2.9 billion. So it's a calculation based on our employer survey and also the particular individuals who responded to the survey and their revenues.
So, how often do you conduct a survey like this? Is this something that you've kind of only adopted since COVID, or how often are you going through these numbers?
We do this every 3 or 4 years, approximately. So our first calculation like this was based on 2014 numbers, and at that time we estimated that the losses to the industry due to labor shortages was $1.5 billion. And people went, whoa, that's a lot of money. Part of that also depends on commodity prices. So, for example, with the grain and oilseed sector, as I mentioned, it's highly mechanized, but if you have one person that is not there and they're not driving the combine, that can greatly affect your industry, your farm, and then also the industry as a whole. So those are things that are also involved in that. The second time that we did our estimate was just before the pandemic, based on the 2018 crop year, and that was $2.9 billion in general was the cost of labor shortages. These numbers this time around that we, with this report, are only tied, are shortages tied only to COVID and do not include other sorts of costs due to ongoing labor shortages. So we did not ask that question. We were just this time around only concerned about COVID issues.
Now, as a research council, you're always looking at a bunch of different research that obviously surrounds different aspects of human resources in agriculture. What's next for you guys? What's the next bit of research you're working on?
Well, there have been a lot of questions about skills. And that was when I mentioned about it, we need to find enough bodies. We also need to find people with the skills. So a lot of people are saying, well, there's increasing technology and innovation in agriculture. We can grow more, produce more with fewer people. However, what that means is that people need to have an increased level of skills. What are those? And what are the skills that we will need in the future? So that is likely where we'll be heading in future research.
Okay, awesome. And if anyone's looking to find any of these reports or some of the research you guys have done in the past, how do they go about doing that?
Our research reports are on our website. We have a labor market information page, LMI, and this research on COVID is on our website. And people can also contact us at the Canadian Agriculture HR Council at any time.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. Is there anything else you'd like to add, I guess, before I let you go? Anything else you'd like to tell producers?
No, I don't think so. I just thank you very much for the opportunity to speak about our research. And if anybody has any questions about research with a particular type of commodity or a particular a province, we would be very pleased to let people know what the situation was like in your neck of the woods.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone who tuned in today. It's always great. I hope if you are across southern Alberta, southern Saskatchewan, like I am right now, it is very windy. So stay grounded this weekend. And for those of you that are out seeding, if you're listening to me on the tractor right now, be safe. And thank you very much. And I guess we'll talk to you guys all on Monday.